Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and Droids gets a new creative team for its last, fully original story. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler. We're looking this time at a story by, not Dave Manak, but George, it's Carragone, with penciler Mary Wilshire and inker of all people, Al Williamson. Of course, that creative team is different than the usual creative team of Dave Manak as writer and John Romita doing the artwork. It's a story entitled Separated, and it is the last of the totally original issues of Star Wars Droids. Issue number 5. Says up there at the top, it had to happen. R2-D2 and C-3PO, separated. It's being released, by the way, back in July of 1986, in case I forget to mention that later. We have basically C-3PO's butt in our face, saying, "Gulp, I'll never see R2 again." And a character that we'll meet on the inside pulling R2 away, saying, "Come on, you little bucket of bolts." This, of course, today can be found in the pages of Star Wars Omnibus, Droids, and Ewoks. Now, the story features 2 parts. The regular part, the first part, is named Separated. Usually that's just the name of the main storyline used for the first part. And the second part is entitled Malice in the Palace. They're poets and hopefully know it, because if not, then that was kind of lame. We can find C-3PO and R2-D2 on the planet Arduba. Kind of caught in the midst of traffic and whatnot here. R2 seemingly walking with his middle tread rather than rolling around, because the position of his feet, that's a little bit weird. And they make their way to the Droid store to basically offer themselves for jobs to others. This is where the droids wind up being separated. Usually they are bought, sold, rented, sent out, whatever, as a pair, but not this time. A young man from the cover by the name of Kirk Windjammer shows up here looking for a droid for his ship. Basically an ocean-going vessel as opposed to a space vessel, and he buys R2-D2. He needs an astromech. Only that separates him from C-3PO, but C-3PO also has a buyer. The guy who darn near ran them down on the first page here is a guy by the name of Baron Starlock, who is an advisor to the ruler of the planet, who is Prince Jagoda. And they buy C-3PO. So the two are separated, but at least still on the same planet. That moves us into Part 2, Malice in the Palace. And in Part 2, we find that Prince Jagoda has kind of some screwball guys for advisors, some treacherous advisors, because they're working on a plan to bring him down and essentially take over, to eliminate him. Prince Jagoda is meeting with the ambassador from Doranda, or Dorandius, D-O-R-A-N-D-E. And it's basically all for show, because it turns out that Starlock is out there making plans with someone from Dorandi to basically send in a strike force to take down the prince, to eliminate him and put them into power. Baron Starlock actually mentions that he has his droid BX-00 or BX-00 ready to attack and kill the prince. This is overheard by C-3PO. So when the droid does try to attack, C-3PO manages to save the day by grabbing part of a fountain and bashing the droid in, thereby saving the prince. The prince realizes how treacherous his advisors have been up to this point, or at least how bad their advice has been. He kicks the ambassador off the planet, fires his advisors, and takes C-3PO as his new advisor. 3PO is moving up in the world only without R2-D2. "If only R2 were here to share this," he says. Meanwhile, R2-D2 is, of course, with Kirk Windjammer. Kirk is supposed to make a delivery. He doesn't know what it is, but he's supposed to take his ship out and make a delivery as we move into Part 3, Deceptions. Now, this is unusual. Usually a Droids comic has only 2 separate parts. This one has 3, much more like what we saw with the Ewoks comics. Turns out, when they finally meet the men they're delivering it to, who look like they're from the military, it's full of weapons. And those aren't actually loyal subjects. Those are aliens from Doranda. This is the attack force that Starlock and his co-conspirator, the ambassador, had set up to go after the government. Well, they have to keep Kirk quiet. They try to blast him with the missile thanks to R2-D2, they're able to save themselves from the missile, but unfortunately, as they go underwater there to escape, that means that the enemy can still make their way to find Prince Jagoda. They can wind up taking over the planet. So Kirk, thankfully, gets to a communications terminal, tries to send a message to the prince. He's not really being listened to, but thankfully, that's when C-3PO shows up outside the palace, recognizes R2-D2, and are able to go inside and warn Jagoda about what's happening. And they're able to send their own forces to take out the advancing fleet of ships that are coming over the water to eventually try to take him down. So the day is saved thanks to the actions of Kirk Windjammer and R2-D2, and, in another instance, C-3PO, and in this case, those two being able to work together to bring that message to the prince. As the story ends, of course, R2-D2 and C-3PO, they're going to leave, as they usually do at the end of these adventures, only they leave of their own volition. They were bought. They were purchased or rented or something. So they were supposed to be there for good. They're property, in theory, but instead, 3PO and R2 are gone. They left this note. C-3PO writes, "Your Majesty, I'm stepping down as your advisor. I'm not very comfortable giving orders. It's always been my place to serve. Now that R2 and I are together again, it would be best for everyone if we left Arduba to search for a new master to serve. If you want the best man for the advisory job, pick an honest, trustworthy man, like Kirk Windjammer. Yours truly, C-3PO." And that's exactly what happens. The prince takes Kirk on as an advisor. One of the things he does is get rid of some travel taxes between the two societies on the planet, and things will apparently be okay. And as it ends, we get the nice comment there from Kirk. "The first bit of advice I'd give you, sire, is that we never forget those two droids." "Heh," says the prince. "I'm sure we won't, advisor." And the story ends on that note. It's an odd one. Kind of cool to see the intrigue and such. Odd that it's got the 3 parts in here. Kirk makes an interesting character, as does the intrigue on Arduba. It's kind of unfortunate that it's just a 1-issue story. They never went beyond 1 issue with the droid stories until the last story arc that we're going to get to next time around when we look at the droid stuff. But at this point, we're done with any stories of R2 and C-3PO with owners prior to the events of A New Hope. And we're only at issue number 5 of the series here. It is kind of weird, though, that, and we've seen this at different points, it seems like the droids, it's like they're independent, yet they seek to serve, so they're constantly trying to find people to own them, to be their masters, to rent them, to buy them, when there's nothing binding about that. They just up and walk the heck away whenever they want to. Little weird being a droid in the Star Wars universe, I would assume. And if you're going to buy one, buy a freaking restraining bolt, apparently. Otherwise, they're just going to leave your butt when they feel like it. A decent little story, but it begs the question, as always, is this story an essential read? Gotta say, separated here, not essential at all. A decent little tale, but it has no impact on anything beyond itself, unfortunately. We are going to move on with the Droid series, but we will be seeing an oddity the next time it comes around, with an adaptation of A New Hope beyond anything that anybody back then or today would expect. With that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.